Hi, it's Dr. Byron. I love me some histology. We're going to talk about epithelial tissues and their histologic features. For the learning objectives, I want you to be able to describe the histologic features of various epithelia and correlate their locations in the body and their specific functions. The term tissue refers to groups of cells organized to perform one or more specific function. Organs, like the liver, is comprised of 4 basic tissue types. Epithelial cells, which cover surfaces, lines cavities, and tubes, and form glands and ducts. They are closely connected or appositioned to one another via cell junctions and rest on a basal lamina, also known as the basement membrane. There are other connective tissue, as well as muscle tissue and nervous tissue, which we will talk about in later lectures. For this particular lecture, we're really going to focus on epithelium. Now, you all know what a general cell looks like. You have your nucleus, plasma membrane, your organelles. However, cells have different shapes and sizes and arrangements, which we're going to discuss more specifically here. When it comes to classification, it's classified by 2 types of composition. First, we look at the shape or the side view of the cell. So if they're flat, they're called squamous cells. If they're cuboidal or squared, right? If they're tall, they're called columnar cells. And there's a specific type of specialized cell, which is called a transitional cell, that change shapes or stretches. And we see that in the bladder, which is why it's called urothelium. The other classification is by the arrangements. They can be arranged in one cell layer, simple squamous, cuboidal, or columnar. There are specialized cells, which are pseudostratified or urothelium. And then if it's more than 2 cell layers thick, they are called the stratified type of epithelia. Now let's first discuss the single layered epithelium. Squamous means serpent or fish scales in Latin. See that the cells are very flat. They can be found in blood vessels, body cavities, Bowman's capsule, and alveoli of the lungs. One mnemonic I'd like to share with you, and you could take some time to look at this. You think about a boat that's a vessel that's present in a sea of fish, indicating squamous cells, containing a time capsule, indicating Bowman's capsule, run by pirates who smoke. You want to think of lung alveoli, and they also have cavities in their mouth, so you want to think lining of the body cavity. Now, with simple squamous epithelium, keep in mind that all epithelium have the main role as a barrier, separating one area from the other. So you have to know about the other functions. Lubrication is one example where the pleura of the lung and the thoracic cavity secrete lubricating fluid to protect the surface of the organs in the cavity. In lung exchange, right, you think about the type 1 pneumocytes, and the capillaries are simple squamous. They have to be thin for molecules and gas to diffuse back and forth. When it comes to simple cuboidal, you see one cell layer, cubed kind of cells, and they can be seen in kidney tubules, thyroid follicles, small exocrine ducts, as well as surface of the ovaries. Now, I have one mnemonic, and you think of the keto diet, K-E-T-O, right? Kidney tubules, you want to think of a kebab with a single layer of meat, fish, or chicken, or vegetables, right? So again, each single layer of meat and vegetables, right? Keto diet, so kidney, exocrine ducts, thyroid follicle, ovary. With simple cuboidal epithelium, again, the other functions you want to be mindful of are absorption and secretion. One example is the proximal renal tubule, which can reabsorb nutrients, protein, and water, as well as secrete anions and cations. In the ducts, like for instance in the pancreatic ducts, right, they function as a conduit, which basically means, containing or becoming a channel. So I like to think of ducts conduct, think of conduit function. And can you see that these are little squared cells? Okay, little squared cells there. Now, simple columnar epithelium, you see tall cells, one layer, very commonly seen in the gastrointestinal tract as well as the gallbladder. And a major function, as you would think in the intestinal tract, is absorption. They also secrete, like mucus. In the gallbladder, they can secrete fluids to mix with the bile acids. Next, we're going to review multi-layered epithelia. With stratified squamous epithelium, you can see that there are multiple layers, cells layered one on top of another like layers of a brick. You can also see that the basal cell here is connected to the underlying basement membrane. And you commonly see the stratified squamous epithelium in skin, mouth, esophagus, and vagina. And the main function of this epithelium is barrier protection. Just imagine the hot foods and drinks that are exposed in the mouth and the esophagus. It has to protect the underlying tissue. The skin, of course, barrier. Just imagine yourself in the tub, right, protecting your body, your inner tissue from the water that's located outside. Next, we have stratified cuboidal epithelium. You can see that it's 2 or more layers of cube-shaped cells. And in this image here, you can see one layer, 2 layer, 1 layer, 2 layer, 1 layer, and an outer layer. Okay, 1 layer, and then you have your outer layer there. So you can distinctly see 2 cell layers. Location-wise, you can see it in sweat gland ducts, exocrine gland ducts, and the anal rectal junction. And the main function is barrier and conduit. Stratified columnar epithelium are rare locations in the body. And you notice here that you have two cell layers. The top layer is distinctly columnar, but the bottom layer is a little bit more too, because these are stem cells or basal cells that are attached to the underlying basement membrane. So the focus is mainly on this top cell layer. It's layered, stratified, but the most important cell is on top there, which are your columnar cells. You commonly see this in large ducts of the exocrine glands and the anorectal junction, as well as the conjunctiva. Now, in the conjunctiva, you see these specialized cells here, or what we call goblet cells, and they distinctly secrete mucus to keep our conjunctiva lubricated and moist. But overall, if you're seeing them in ducts, think about conduit function. Let's review specialized epithelium. Pseudostratified columnar epithelium are officially 2 cell layers thick, and the reason why they're called pseudostratified is they have a layering effect. It looks like they're layered, but they're not really. The nuclei are at different levels, which makes it look like it's layered, and basically all the cells are connected to the underlying basal lamina. As you can see here, an analogy would be in a train or a subway car, everyone's foot is touching the floor, but you can see that their heads are at different levels. They are commonly seen in the tracheobronchial tree as well as the epididymal efferent duct. And main roles, if it's in the duct, it's conduit, right? If it's in the tracheobronchial tree, they can have secretory functions, and there can also be some absorptive properties like in the efferent duct as well. With the urothelium, it's also considered a pseudostratified epithelium, but for test purposes, please know that it's distinctly called urothelial cells or transitional epithelium. You can see that they have different layers here. However, looks are deceiving. First, know that this epithelium is comprised of 3 cell populations. You got your dome cell, your intermediate cell, and your basal cells. They are commonly seen in the urinary tract, so bladder, ureter, renal calyx, and urethra. And what I want you to notice here is that all the cells, again, are connected to the underlying basal lamina. So it looks very much layered, right? There are nuclei on top. You got your dome cells, your intermediate cells, and you got your basal stem cells here. But all of these cells are connected to the underlying basal lamina. And the major function that's very unique to this epithelium is stretch property. So when your bladder is full, it's stretched. When your bladder is empty, it goes back to its normal shape and height. I want you to take a minute here to kind of guess the type of epithelium. I will be showing you some pictures, but I will give you locations. You recognize that you have your kidney tubule, simple cuboidal, small intestinal, simple columnar, skin, stratified squamous, and your bladder. You got your 3 cell layers, your dome cell, intermediate cell, and your basal cell, which is your transitional urothelium. Kind of look over this mind map here, a recap. And I gave you a table here to kind of look at all in one-stop shop format. Please know your shapes, your layering, your key locations, and your functions, which will all be tested on your exams. On that note, please contact me if you have any questions, need clarifications, and I will see you at the next lecture. Thank you. Bye!